All right. Welcome to Be the Market Expert. And let's kick it off with this. If you were on Coffee Talk with us the other day, you were, part of this limited discussion that we had around the 50-year mortgage. All right. So we had some people weigh in, and essentially it was they're probably serious about this. And, what does this really look like? So first and foremost, like as we go through and we just think about the 50-year mortgage, why would it be proposed? Well, it would be proposed as a affordability lever to get someone into some time of home ownership. And I get it. On the other side of the aisle, there's going to be people that said, well, hey, if the average person, the median first-time home buyer being 40 years old in our country right now, were to buy a house, this puts them at 90 before their home's paid off. And I hear that, right? And we think about this and we look through it. It says, hey, this 50-year mortgage is from Sarah Wheeler. And she says, well, hey, yeah, there would be higher interest rates, right? Because when we go through and we look at this is a riskier loan. When we think about the demographic that is going to be the consumer of a 50-year product, this is someone that has most likely lesser of a down payment. All right, they have lesser of a down payment and they need to be able to qualify for this 50-year loan. And what's going to happen is the banks have a lot of money riding on this thing. And so there could be some higher interest rates from what we've seen in the past. And so where did this thing come from? Well, it came from a X post the president put out there, and then the FHFA director came out and said, yeah, we heard you guys, and we got to do something to help this affordability issue. Here's the deal. We absolutely have an affordability crisis in the United States. And we can link this to a lot of stuff. And we'll look at some things here as we kind of roll through it, but we do have one of these tabs that's talking about like the Titan credit and some of the things that this has done. So let's look at this. So we have this 50-year loan, and so they just kind of ran some numbers. All right, so here we go. Let's zoom in a little bit. And let's not even look at $300,000 and $400,000. Let's go right to 500. We're gonna look at a condo. And remember, this is just PI. This isn't taxes or insurance. And so if we look at this, let's look at the 50-year or the 500,000, 30-year, they're saying, yeah, if interest rates are about 6.32%, the 50-year, we can guesstimate around 6.8% of an interest rate. So it's about $169 a month difference is what someone would be saving. And in all reality, guys, like that's real money for a lot of home borrowers. Now, this is where people kind of gasp at this, and you look at your total interest. And this is shocking, right? Like if we look at this, even on a $500,000 loan, guys, you're paying about $1,100,000, which is nuts to think about, right? That's why when you get that packet, you go to a closing and they give you that amortization schedule, and it's that packet is this thick, and oh goodness, it is rough. Well, then they're saying, well, if you do a 50-year, you're playing close to let's call it 100 or 1.9, or 1.8. Let's round up. $1.8 million over the course of 50 years for borrowing $500K. Now, here's the deal, right? We can go through and we can look at all of the different pros and cons and weigh this out, and yet we just don't know the life situation that people have to where does this make sense for them without having the conversation. Because yes, if we were to go look at like the S&P 500 right now, we could go look and we could say that, hey, the S&P 500, your Pokemon collection, your Air Jordan collection could be outperforming the return that you would get on housing. But yet what we also know is when you lock into this interest rate, it is locked in forever, right? It doesn't go up or down. It could go down. You have to pay for it to go down, but it locks in. This is why we talk about real estate being a hedge against inflation, because we live in the United States of America, which brings us to this chart right here. And this is kind of what we were talking about the other day for a little bit. We are the only country in the world with a 30-year fixed rate mortgage, which means that you can get a 30-year mortgage currently, maybe 50 here in the future, and the interest rate will not go up on you. You look at Canada, they have a 25-year mortgage, and within 5 years, so after that 5-year mark, it fluctuates with whatever the market's doing. You look at the United Kingdom, they have a 25 to 30-year product, but depending on which one you get, after 2 to 5 years, then it starts fluctuating with the market, right? Australia doesn't have anything. They say, hey, whatever our rates are, that's what our rates are, right? They go through. You look at Germany, they're going in here. They say with theirs that you can do a 10 to 20-year fixed, and then depending on what product, it's going to change. But guys, you look at this, and then you go to Singapore, China, India. This is all super variable. All right. You are going to be on that adjustable mortgage depending on what their economy is doing. Now, what's interesting is if you look at this Nordics, this also has Switzerland. So Switzerland has a 50-year product. Now, what I think that I read, and we can just go look at ChatGPT because this is just the whole conversation that we had with it. Here's your Sweden. They have a 50-year product, but it's only fixed up to 10 years. And then every 3 months it adjusts. Guys, be thinking about that. Think about where we were. Like, let's go look at this. All right. So let's go back through here and let's go look at the last 2 years. I wish we could go a little bit bigger. But thinking about this, like think about what if you bought in this time period, and then it just kept going up, and then it goes higher, and it goes up, and it just goes higher. And then you are just in this point to where you're never this low. And this would have been a really, really big deal back in 2022, right? 2021 money was free. People were getting locked in, or in at least the United States, at 2-3% interest rates. Think about what that would have done if you were to have gotten one of these products right here where they fluctuate every 3 months. And in the end of the spring, the summertime in 2022, we saw interest rates skyrocket. The issue wasn't that they went up as high as they did. The issue was the speed to which they went up. We've never saw them go up as quickly as they did in that short amount of time. So be thinking about what that would have done. If you were in Sweden and you had one of these products and you had 2%, you're like, this is really, really awesome. And then next thing you know, you're at 10%.
Real quick,
Then we really
what are those countries' foreclosure rates?
Well, I'm not sure. I actually don't know the answer to that. I would have to look into it. I think what you would probably find, like especially in like Germany and some of these places, what you would see is that most home ownership is not the individuals. It is like government owned housing is kind of what you see. And so we that's interesting. Great. Well, here, let's just do this. Let's just see what happens. Let's just see if Skynet will pull this information, because I think that's a great question. So if we were to look at it, so we actually have the highest. All right. So it says very low, well under this. It says lenders renegotiate terms because loans renew every 1 to 5 years. And I wonder if that's just the way that they kind of go through and they look at this, because I wonder if what they're resetting their terms, if you just really just don't qualify anymore and they pull it out, right? Do they just pull the loan back from you, right? Conservative underwriting, long-term fixed periods, strong social safety nets, conservative lending. I mean, we have conservative lending, right? High savings rates. I don't know. I don't know if this answered. I'll dive into it a little bit deeper because I think that's actually a great question. What I think that you would actually find if we were to keep pushing Skynet is that a lot of these different countries, again, they just don't have high home ownership. And so what you're going to find out is that a lot of these other countries, the government owns most of the housing. And so you are super well qualified before you even get into this. But then again, this lender renegotiates term because loans renew every 1 to 5 years. I wonder if this is really just more of a kick out clause. So they don't really foreclose on you. They just take the house back, which would be interesting. We'll look at it. So let's switch gears a little bit and let's talk about industry, because I think there's some industry stuff that we have to understand. And right now, you guys are probably seeing this float on the Insta Twitters right now, right? You're going through, you're seeing this pop up on all of your social feeds. And Zillow is in like one of those cage matches where it's like them versus like a lot of other people. It's kind of interesting. And so it says, if you've lost count of the number of lawsuits filed against Zillow over the past 6 months, you're probably not alone. It says their legal woes began in June of 2025 when Compass filed its antitrust against Zillow, and they kicked it into yet another gear this last week with the home buyer plaintiff filed a Real Estate Settlement Procedures Act, yes, RESPA, against Zillow. All right. So they're saying it's ongoing, and it's from anywhere where they have 7 lawsuits ranging from antitrust to copyright infringement to job discrimination. And firstly, what do we got with Compass? So if we look at Compass, they're on the war path right now. And I would say they're on the war path because of Zillow and the MLS, right? I think those are the 2 people that told Zillow how Compass had to play in the sandbox. And Compass said, this is our sand. You're not going to tell us how to play with our sand in the sandbox. And so firstly, Compass went out and they're filing this lawsuit because what's happening is Zillow said, listen, yeah, we get that it's your listings. Your agents are out there doing the work. It's yours. But hey, here's the deal. We have the largest platform in the world for people going to look at housing. And if you privatize your listings for any period of time, what we're going to do is we are going to blacklist your listings from hitting the MLS, and we're not going to show it to our large database of consumers. And so, guys, we have to keep in mind, like, what happened. So what happened was back in the day, the Real Estate Association, they were like, you know what, we have a great idea. There's this company called Zillow. They've approached us, and they would like to take our listing data and send it out to the world. And guess what will happen? We'll get more eyes on our products, and we will sell more houses, which is a win for our consumers. And then Zillow, right, was like, hey, guys, thank you for all your info. Now everyone's coming to us. And if you would like, what we could do is we could give you those leads back for a premium for your listings. And they don't even sell it back to the listing agent. They actually sell it to a buyer that wants it, which is just Zillow's model, neither here nor there. But if we look at this, so now Compass is frustrated and they are suing Zillow over this right now. And then it says, Compass, ahead of its hearing with Robert Reffkin hemmed firm, claims to have uncovered evidence that Zillow and Redfin, which is not a defendant in the lawsuit, but in which also announced it owned yet to be enforced listing access standard policy, right? So what they're doing is they're actually going through and they are having communications where their Redfin and Zillow are not going to compete against each other anymore. And so that's a whole nother thing. CoStar. All right. So when we think about CoStar, this is like homes.com. This is LoopNet. This is apartments.com. This is the big company that pops up on Super Bowl Sunday Super Bowl Sunday these days. And they're the ones that are pushing these housing. And then they have like the celebrity ads where they're not allowed to say that they're the largest real estate platform in the world anymore. Well, anyway, CoStar filed a lawsuit. And what they did was they said, hey, they're copyright infringement. All right. They're actually taking images of ours and they're using them. And they said, hey, we own this information. So now what they're going, and we're talking large amount of money, says this is not the first time Zillow has been sued for copyright infringement. It says it was previously sued by a photography firm and was ordered to pay millions after the jury found them liable. All right. So then we go through And there is this past employee that is now suing them for wrongful termination, and said he was forced out of the company after he said that there was some discrimination. All right, we'll see how this thing plays out. Regulators versus Zillow. So now we're going through, and it says that again, rent.com, apartments guide. This is these big companies. What they are doing is they said this has piqued the interest of the FTC, because what they're doing is they're saying that in mid-February, Zillow announced $100 million multi-rental syndication deal with Redfin. So this is what they were talking about above. And so what they said was, hey, we won't compete against you guys. How about you just send all of your stuff our way? Guys, this is antitrust. This is anti-competitiveness. And so they inked a deal, is what they said. So what they did was they cut a check of $100 million to Redfin, so that Redfin wouldn't compete with them anymore on those sites. Okay. But then there's RESPA one. This is going to be the interesting one. So what has happened? Again, we go through, you guys do all the work. It syndicates to the MLS, or you put on the MLS, it syndicates out, it goes to Zillow. Zillow, then they're a for-profit company. How do they make the most amount of their money? Well, they sell the leads that your listings make back to people that want to buy the leads. That only goes so far, right? That amount of money only goes so far. So they're a for-profit company. They got stockholders. They got to make more money. What do? Well, they start bringing in these other companies that touch real estate, right? They all want a piece of the real estate agent commission. And so now they're going through and they have this mortgage product. They have other products that are associated with it as well. And so they have their Zillow Flex and their Premier Agent programs that are a little bit different, but they're pretty much the same. And what happened was Zillow agents were told that if you did not push our clients that we have sent your way back to our affiliate programs, we are going to turn off your leads. And now we have a big antitrust issue now. All right. Because now we're going through and we are going in and we have this thing where it's essentially kickbacks and tying arrangements. All right. We got kickbacks and we got tying arrangements. And this is going to be the big one. All right. This is those ones where they said, hey, you need to push your clients to get a loan through our company. And if you do not, we won't allow you to be a part of our lead program anymore, and we will turn it off. Well, from what I understand, that this has been on some recordings. They got some sales reps actually saying this kind of stuff. And we're going to see what happens here. This is a big, big deal. This is actually probably the one that actually gets them a little bit more hurt than the rest of them. This, guys, when we talk about this Compass versus Zillow one, this is one of the big chain reactions that we see where Compass is going out and buying anywhere and stuff. So we'll see how this plays out. All right, let's switch gears again. Let's talk about Resi Club. And we're not going to spend a whole lot of time on this, but I think this is interesting. So what Resi Club did is they had this conversation, and through this conversation, they talked to Blackstone and they talked to the CEO of Amherst. And both of these are very large holders of real estate. And so Blackstone, guys, as of right now, I think owns like 86,000 single family homes, and the CEO of Amherst 43,000, let's round up, 43,000 homes. All right. So when we look at this, what they're doing is they're saying, okay, well, what's going on with the housing market? You know, why do we have this affordability issue, right? It says fixing the affordability starts with housing credit reform, which is interesting. All right, so let's go back here and look at this. So if you guys have watched The Big Short, because you know that's your homework and you need to watch it because I feel like that's part of your job. We got housing permits. Well, what happens is the builders got caught holding the bag. They were just building. If you build it, they will come, right? That was the motto. And then what happened? People started losing their jobs. It got wild out there. And you can see this giant, giant, giant halt in production. All right, we can see this. This is astronomical. Well, keep in mind also, guys, when we think about here, the population has gotten significantly larger now than when it was back here, and new builds just are not building houses. All right, so we go through and we see this big tip off. And again, what do we know happened here? Housing crisis, foreclosure crisis, the Big Short. Again, we'll explain all this to you. So we go through and we look at this. Well, check this out. All right, so if we're looking at this, and here we are, this is where you could fog a mirror and you got a house. And it was like a Kohl's credit card. Guys, this was like you could have up to 5. All right. You can have up to 5 Kohl's credit card. And every time you do, we're going to give you $50 off your purchase. Hey, and if you have less than $50 worth of product, your product is free today. And so what they were doing is they had these people that were less than qualified. All right. Outside of credit scores, they were less than qualified. I mean, well, when you guys go watch The Big Short, this is anywhere from like a McDonald's employee having like 4 houses to some other stuff in there. And yet, here's the deal. The issue that they really ran into during this time period wasn't necessarily that the McDonald's employee had 4 or 5 houses. The issue was that there was no Airbnb, there was no VRBO, there was none of these things to actually create some income coming in. So it created these things called zombie foreclosures. All right, so we had zombie foreclosures coming in, and essentially what this was this is the creation of the bird dog. All right, so you would actually go through and you would look to go find like, okay, what mailboxes are overflowing, who hasn't cut their grass in 4 or 5 months, lights burned out, windows broken. And so what was happening is the banks were taking these drives and they were looking around. They're like, uh-oh, we have an issue. No one lives in this home. That's why they're not making payments. No one lives here. So again, it wasn't the issue that the McDonald's employee had 5 houses. The issue was they had 1 home that they lived in and they had 4 more homes for funsies that they weren't doing anything with. Well, so then what they do, they put in some reform and they said, hey, on top of being able to fog a mirror to get a house, you also have to have a better credit score. And so this is kind of what your better credit score looks right now, right? So your 50th percentile, when you look at this, this is a 775. You go down to a 770 or 721, and then down to a 660. So yeah, 660 can still get someone a house, but we understand that they're a bit bigger risk and they're going to probably have a higher interest rate. But if we look at the 660, it's not a whole lot less than where these guys were, right? Back when we had these issues of people buying these houses. So we go in and we kind of play with this a little bit more. And so when we're looking at this, here is your single family home permits. All right. So this is, they've gone through and this isn't the starts. All right. So what this is not them actually plowing the land and starting to put in the plumbing and the concrete. This is literally just them going through and them applying for the permit to start the work. This isn't the work actually starting. This is the permit to start the work. Well, if we look at this, we have Florida, we have Texas, we have California, where these are some of the most populous pieces of land that we own in the United States. We have us, Colorado, there's your square. We got Wyoming with nothing going on. But if we look at this is saying that, hey, people, they're still building some houses. They're just not building as many as they were. And so, guys, when we look at this and we talk about when we go through and how come home prices aren't coming down? Well, home prices aren't coming down because there's not enough real estate. Not enough real estate's being built. What's interesting, though, if we go back up to here, a lot of people are attributing this. They're saying, yeah, home prices have gotten high. The cost of money has also gotten high, but we've also put these standards in place where we have some of the most well-qualified borrowers out there But yet, with that being said, we also have less people entering into the space that might be able to afford it because they have a good job. They just don't have credit. They don't have the credit available to them, even though they're a welder, they're a plumber, they're making north of $100,000 a year, but yet they never had a credit card to establish credit. And so what they're calling for right now is this reform to some of these credit policies that we have in place. And the other side of the aisle is, oh my God, it looks like 2008 then, right? To where it was fog a mirror, get as many loans as you wanted. And so what is the happy median here? Like, what do we drop this credit reporting scoring down to, this loan value down to, this debt to income? And then what does that do? So we'll kind of see what this looks like, but they're calling for it. All right. This one interests me a lot. And so I did go to the New York Post. I said, all right, I had my options on where I could go for this. I could have gone to Fox News. I could have gone to CNN. And I said, well, we're talking about New York. Let's go to the New York Post. And so we go through, and what did we have last week? We had some elections, and we have a new mayor of New York City. And so we're not going to get political on this conversation, but yet I do want to have a conversation around this. The conversation that I do want to have is around rent control. Now, when we start talking about rent control, what we have is we have these entrepreneurs. And these entrepreneurs have gone out and they said, I am going to be entrepreneurial through real estate, and I am going to buy real estate, and then I'm going to rent it to the people that cannot go out and purchase housing on their own. Now, again, I know some of you are like Blackstone. Remember, we already went over Blackstone. They own 86,000 single-family homes in the United States. 86,000. That's more than any of us combined times however much own. And yet, with that being said, they only own 86,000 homes. So this is not institutional investors. This is mom and pops. And mom and pops are what makes up most of the investors that are in the long-term rental industry game, if you will, right? So when we're looking at this, what we're seeing now is we are going to put rent control. And with rent control, now they're going to have to make a decision on what they're going to do with their real estate. Also, what we have is we have taxation, right? They're going to go through, and it's the tax the rich. It's tax the rich. All right. And the rich isn't necessarily rich. They're just better off than most people, because the thresholds aren't really there. If you guys saw Colorado ballots, I think it was like $300,000 was the cutoff. So you were north of $300,000, you were the rich. And so when we go through and we look at this, what we're seeing now is we are seeing people leave New York. And it depending on what site you go to, it could be Connecticut, it can be it could be Florida, it could be whatever. We don't know what the long-term ramifications of this are, but what we do know is rent control has not worked. Going through and saying, hey, you have a large financial amount of money that you have put into this segment, and now we are going to cap your earnings, doesn't necessarily work. All right. And I want you guys to think about this from a realistic point. What if you went through and you were told, hey, as a real estate agent, you're only allowed to make X amount of dollars, and every dollar above that, you have to give back to your client? Most of you probably wouldn't be a real estate agent, right? So we're going through and we're going to look at what this plays out. So we are seeing, and what they're saying is, this isn't 2005, or this isn't 5 years ago, right? This isn't 5 years ago when we had the global pandemic and the rich moved out and just bought a second home and a third home, and they were just waiting for everything to cool off. They're saying, no, they're absolutely bailing now. And guys, this comes from the New York Post, right? They said these guys are actually bailing. The wealthy are leaving because of taxes. We are going to see people sell off their real estate because now they are being told how much money they're allowed to earn on it. And we're going to see these people disappear. And guess what? This does not start a tsunami. All right. What they're going to do is they're going to move out. They're going to put it for sale. And let's just say it was Blackstone, right? It's single family, so it's probably not Blackstone. But what's Blackstone? What would they do? They're just going to claim it as losses. They're going to let this stuff sit vacant, and they're just going to put it on a loss on their P&L. We have not even seen the tip of the iceberg of what this is going to do. And yet, I don't think it's going to have a huge impact on Colorado real estate. But yeah, it's going to be very interesting to see what happens on New York City real estate as this keeps unfolding. All right, let's talk about Logan Moshami, Housing Wire. And so he says the housing market saw a seasonal inventory drop alongside a 15.6% rise in pending sales year over year, indicating strong buyer activity. All right, full stop, guys. Strong buyer activity. How many of you guys are getting busier, right? We go through and we're now in November. You should be hibernating already. And they're saying nationwide, we're seeing buyers getting out there right now. So we're going through, we're in the season of renewal. We need to be having as many conversations as possible. He says last week, housing inventory levels decreased noticeably, while our weekly pending sales showed a notable increase compared to the same period last year. He says, was this decrease in inventory primarily due to seasonal decline in the housing stock? Or did the increase in demand contribute to the lower inventory level? He says, let's dive into this thing. All right, cool. So let's look at it. Here we are. We did see a little bit of a dip. And we can see again, we're almost 17% more inventory this time versus last year. So year over year data, we have almost 17% more inventory nationwide. All right. So we go through and let's look at new listings. This is single family new listings. And we can see that we are higher, right? Here's 2025. And so we had this little bit of a jump right here. Okay, cool. Looks like a little bit of seasonality. Looks like even 2023 had a little bit of the same jump. But your price cut percentages, 41%, let's round up to 42% of all homes nationwide have taken a price cut. All right, so we have 42% of all homes nationwide taking a price cut. We would have looked at this a couple years back and said only 1/3 of all homes nationwide take a price cut in any given year. So what is that telling us? Well, as a buyer, what we're going to go through and we're going to look at this and saying, hey, there is opportunity. We have nothing but motivated sellers on the market right now. And guys, that's probably the biggest paradigm shift from 2021 until now that we have to keep in mind. 2021 money was free. Right? We would go through, we'd raise our hand, say that we were a real estate agent, and someone was saying, you know what? Funny that you say that you're a real estate agent. I was actually thinking about buying a house. Well, now the people that are buying, selling are the ones that are going through and they are the motivated. They have some kind of life event, right? We think about this as like this roller coaster. Every 3 to 7 years, people historically are buying homes. What we don't know is where they're going to land on that 3 to 7 year cycle. And it's a life event. That's who's selling. That's who's buying currently in this market. They're having babies and their houses are getting bigger. Their babies are growing up and they no longer want to live in the parents' basement anymore because they're over the avocado toast. And now they need to go buy their own home. They're getting married, right? They are getting jobs. They are getting transferred. They are getting deployed. Unfortunately, people are dying. People are getting laid off from work. We have all these different things happening. And yet that is our only job in this market, is to have as many conversations as possible, to be in emotional proximity to everybody for when they are ready to transact business, because a life event is happening. They are thinking about us. And 42% price decrease, guys. This means there were some unrealistic expectations, probably from looking back at what their neighbor's house sold for back in 2021 on Zillow. And now that means that if the home hasn't had a price decrease on it, and it might be in your client's perfect home scenario, but the price is a little too much, there might be room for negotiations. All right, we're not going to talk about the 10-year yield or the treasury notes, but let's look at this purchase mortgage application. Guys, slight dip week over week, but look, we are still higher than we were in 2024. This tells you that there are still people out there looking to buy houses. Now I get it. Some of this data is people looking to refinance. Yes, absolutely. There's still people looking to refinance. Believe it or not, interest rates where they are, it is still lower than where some of these people bought in at. And so when we're looking at this, again, season of renewal, what conversation should we be having with who? And again, you don't know unless you talk to them. And this is the bat signal going out. Hey, please talk to your people. You do not know which one of your people went out and talked to a lender and did not loop you in. This could be your best friend from high school. This could be a family member. And for those that have been doing real estate on this call for a long enough period of time, guys, the family member thing's real. The best friend from high school thing is real. And so with this, guys, this just tells me we need to have way more conversations. Your weekly pending, guys, we went into the basement. Now we're popping back up. This pending, this is what Logan's talking about. He says, hey, we got less homes hitting the market. We got more pending sales. So that's taking some inventory off the board. And we saw a little bit of a dip right there. Now, is that seasonality? Or are we going through and we are seeing these buyers? And this is my take on it. My take is this. There's still seasonality. We live in Colorado. We have a very seasonal market in Colorado. We have lifestyle people that live in Colorado, right? We got our skiers, we got our hikers, right? You ask someone from Colorado what they do for fun. Oh, I go skiing. I go hiking, right? I love the nature, right? Like that's Colorado. We have very lifestyle people in Colorado. So yes, seasonality is very real. But yet I think what's more real in this market, because the interest rates have pretty much stayed flat, and we'll look at it. But with the market and the interest rate staying flat, which is a good thing, that is what we want to see. What we're seeing now is buyers are coming online because life event happens. They have to buy a house. Life event happens. They have to buy a house. They go through, they get qualified, right? We saw the purchase mortgage application data. And then that home that's been sitting for 3-4 months that no one has put an offer on, they're like, you know what? That home actually makes sense for my family and I. Guys, it is the weirdest thing that we are seeing. And yet that's the only thing that makes sense for me right now. We cannot actually put a pin on something and say this is the exact reason, but we are seeing multiple offer situations. We are seeing booms in showing activity for an open house when the house has sat on the market for 2-3 months, and then a weekend goes by and they're like, we had 20 people through. The reason for that is because buyers are coming online because life events right now. It's not because interest rates are super awesome. It's because they need a house. So we're looking at this and look, they needed a house. We saw inventory come off the board because we saw this little bit of a spike. And look at this, like, guys, you don't see this spike anywhere else on this, 2-year graph, right? Like typically it's just going down. They're sleeping. Oh, we have a little bit, and then they're sleeping, and then they'll start to wake up next year. But guys, we just saw an uptick. So he says, typically I would refer to this as inflation week, but until the government shutdown is resolved. All right, so I don't have your guys' government shutdown update, but what we do know is it passed through the Senate. Unless something weird happens, your government should be opening up. We have to believe that with the 8 Democrats that have come over and signed the bill and it getting through the Senate, that it should have no problem getting through the House at this point. Weird stuff has happened. So we'll see. So it says, additionally, a few speeches from the Fed presidents may also impact the market. Guys, here's the deal. We understand, especially with the current administration that we have, that people of power, when they say something and they have a big enough audience and a loud enough voice, that they impact stuff. The Fed is no different. The Fed goes out and they said, oh, well, we don't like how this is looking. They spook people. They come out and they say, no, we don't plan on doing anything to help the economy. They spook people. They go through, and about a couple months ago, they said, actually, if no one else gets a job and our jobs stay where they are right now, even though they're not super awesome, they're not super terrible, But if not another American gets a job and we stay flat, we're okay with that. That spooks people. All right. So depending on what these guys say, this could impact what our interest rates look like. But here's what our interest rates are right now. Let's go to 1 month. I'm going to go 1 month full instead of the last 9 days, because that's truly what this is. This probably stops on the 9th. It says it actually, or it stopped on the 10th. Yeah, because today's the 11th. So if you look at this, guys, outside of this weird spiky right here, this is pretty solid, right? What we want to see is we don't want people to think that they can time the market. Timing the market is when you see stuff like this, they are like, I think we're in a peak right now. I'm going to wait for the valley. Well, the valley doesn't work. And this is the reason why, guys. When we go through and we're having these conversations with our buyers, and they're like, well, hey, I don't want to do anything because I want to wait for interest rates to get to the lowest possible. Well, here's the deal. How do you lock in an interest rate? You have to have a home. This is the home I'm interested in, lock it in. So unless you're playing some weird game where you just write an offer on a home just to lock in your interest rate, which is unethical, and I actually think you get into trouble, right? Good faith and all. What that could look like is that they're holding off and they're not getting approved because they don't want to lock in a rate that doesn't make sense. They should be going out with you as the real estate economist of choice, starting to say, yeah, I am interested in buying a home. None of these homes make sense yet, but we're going through, we're showing them the houses. And then when they find the right house, does the interest rate make sense at that point? And that's the game that we should be playing. We can't time the market. Timing the market's impossible. You don't know if you're in a peak. You don't know if you're in a valley. And even if you were to hit the valley, is there even a home that you're interested in to lock the rate in? And I would say most times that's not how this thing works.